Just because you have a thought doesn't mean that you actually have to believe it. This is actually one of the top 3 common things that gets in the way of individuals achieving their full potential. Is one, believing their self-limiting beliefs, and second, not auditing those beliefs that run through their mind. Curious as to what other things that individuals or organizations have to manage and work through as they work towards achieving their full potential, then you'll want to tune into this episode as I interview an executive coach and a successful business owner on things that he's seen as he partners with leaders and business owners. Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Stan Peake, Director of Leadership Development at FSQ Consulting. With his extensive leadership and entrepreneurial experience, I'm excited to have him share his insights with you. Well, welcome, Stan. Can you share with us a story that has shaped the trajectory of your career, whether it's a success or a challenge that you've had to overcome?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me, Angela. Excited to share whatever I can with your audience that they would find valuable. And one quick story I'll share, which I think epitomizes my leadership journey, is no names, because when we talk about challenges, I will withhold, of course. But I went through a time early in my career where I worked for someone who told me I was spending too much time with the team. They said, you need to read this book, spend less time with the team. I think the book they recommended was The 1 Minute Manager. And it was early in my career, and I thought, am I doing something wrong? And I ended up leaving that post due to a conflict, let's say, in values, and accepting a job with the next leader who happened to be and still is my chief professional mentor and personal mentor. And after leaving that job, sales in my unit actually dropped by 900%. And I don't consider myself the world's greatest salesperson, but it was a great validation, even in my late 20s, that by investing in the team, the business will take care of itself. And it's so important to be aligned on values, as I was with the gentleman who's now, 20 plus years later, still one of my top friends and mentors. So that story really shaped it. I guess the takeaway for me is that values alignment, but also a lot of times adversity is a great teacher. You have to go through those experiences before really knowing what you want and being sure of your path. As a coach, I always joke, you can't coach from a text.
Well, I mean, numbers speak for itself, right? So like you said, when you left and then sales plummeted like that, it just says a lot of what actually worked. And I kind of want to go into that team development piece. So you've been able to scale your practice to over 35 coaches globally. What was the biggest challenge you've had to overcome in order to make this possible?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge that may not necessarily have overcome is twofold. Number one is the inherent challenge of any consulting business, and that is the feast and famine cycle. You are busy trying to get work, and then you're busy servicing all of those contracts, and before you know it, your sales pipeline is on empty. So then you're always going back and forth between sell and serve, sell and serve. And it's really hard to have a scalable, sustainable, predictable business in the consulting space when you are doing purely consulting or coaching, i.e., trading your own time for money. So that's a challenge that's inherent to the business model, which is why we wanted to do as a team. The other thing is really, I think, differentiation and promotion, two opposite sides of the same coin. I'm personally not interested in getting on social media and telling the world how cool I am, how smart I am, how whatever I am. But I have no problem bragging about the team. And so I think with what we've created, number one, we wanted to address the business model challenges, but we also wanted to create a community. And I'd love to really celebrate the amazing work that our clients are doing and that our team is doing. I'm not necessarily interested in, hey, world, look at how cool I am. So I think those two challenges have come together to really underpin the ethos of how we operate and strategically how we're going about business.
Okay, let's double click into that feast and famine mode, right? It's a huge psychological warfare internally, is what I've felt, to navigate that. So for those who haven't experienced that yet, and one day they're going to potentially pursue something independently, can you share about how you navigate that feast and famine cycle and like what strategies you have to, again, really manage the emotions and everything behind going through those different cycles?
Well, you picked the right word in navigate, because the strategy is one thing. In any system, business or otherwise, the quality and quantity of inputs is going to have a major influence on what the output is. In other words, from a sales perspective, you've got to do enough prospecting, networking, getting out there, and then enough following up to make sure you have enough irons in the fire, so to speak, that will lead to revenue actually landing and growing. That's simple enough. However, what gets in the way of that is it's not sexy, it's not necessarily fun, but there's also the inner game. They say leadership is a game of inches, i.e., the 6 inches between our ears. And so when it comes down to someone who is starting their own practice, what are you really selling? Yourself and your own expertise. And I don't know anyone, after hundreds of coaching engagements and working with thousands of leaders collectively over the years, I don't know anyone who's not a sociopath who has not experienced imposter syndrome. So you know what you got to do. I have to reach out to 100 people this week, let's just say, for instance. And every one of those people you're going to look at is, why do they want to hear from me? Who am I to tell them anything about leadership or whatever the case may be? So what I'm saying is we have to navigate our own critic that's going to get in the way of the work we need to do, which is plentiful. Even just on the sales standpoint, there's a lot of work to do. And if our own imposter, our own inner critic gets in the way, we're not selling enough, then we don't have the revenue, then you can't serve, and the whole thing crumbles, and it's a self-perpetuating negative spiral where we beat ourselves up and feel like I'm not a good coach or a consultant, I'm not a good entrepreneur, I'm not a good salesperson. And then, oh, I can't do this as a career. I got to go find something else.
Okay, so you touched on something key there, that concept of imposter syndrome, right? And there are certain behaviors that can actually feed into the negative loop, right? And then you kind of get stuck in that rut. So with your expertise, if you could offer one piece of advice for those who are stuck in that loop, what would that piece of advice be to kind of navigate and then exit that loop?
It comes down to being aware of your own thinking. So just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true. Another one of our coaches, I love the way he's put it, don't believe everything you think. And it is just that, a thought. We have 70,000 thoughts a day. Our brain is very busy. And a lot of times, if we don't direct our brain where we want it to be, it's in random association mode, which is not a bad thing necessarily, because that is actually a good formula for creativity when we're daydreaming or letting our mind wander. However, if we don't check the thoughts that enter our brain, especially if they are limiting in nature, then a thought repeated over time becomes a belief. So I studied cognitive behavioral therapy, and they segment events from thoughts, from beliefs, from emotions, from actions. And really quick, a thing happens, and that thing is neither bad nor good. The thing that makes it bad or good is our thoughts. I like to use the economy as an example. Let's say that the stock market crashes by 30 points. That might seem like a terrible thing. That's the thought. That thought is going to lead to emotions, or that thought is going to lead to a belief that this is a bad economy. There's no such thing as a good or bad economy. There's the state of the economy, which is a moment in time. It's neither good nor bad. It might be expanding, it might be retracting. But even in a bull economy, a bullish economy, there are companies going out of business. And even in a bear economy, when things are on the way down, there's companies that are thriving. So there is no one economy that's great or bad or even neutral. The economy is a summation of millions of businesses. So if we can divorce our thinking from good or bad and analyze, I have a thought. Is it true? Do I have all the evidence that I need to believe this to be true? If not, then we need to be open to different possibilities. Same thing if we tell ourselves, I'm a terrible salesperson, or I'm not cut out to be an entrepreneur. How do you know? There's no test to take before you find out if you're an entrepreneur or not. You launch a business or you don't. And by that logic, there are probably some of the world's best entrepreneurs out there who have yet to launch a business. So people should not tell themselves they're bad at this, whatever. They can just analyze their thoughts and then realign, well, what is my goal? What am I trying to accomplish? And what thoughts, beliefs, and emotions would serve me best on the way to that goal? If your goal is to grow a business, you have to believe it's possible. You have to think about your goal. You have to think about the actions it will take to do that. And I would even add, find a way to enjoy the process. Because if it's all hard work, I had a dietitian that worked with us years ago in a previous business, and the way she put it, if you don't enjoy the journey, you'll never reach your destination. That's why crash diets that are all about suffering and sacrifice don't work. It's the same thing about building a business. If you don't enjoy the journey, you won't reach the destination because you'll pull out.
Okay, I appreciate you touching on all the beliefs aspect of that part, and I want to go into the building aspect, right? Because you talked a lot about how we're caught up in the cycles of, okay, it's either it's sell or serve, right? And sometimes we get too caught up being in the business that we forget that we need to actually work on the business, etc. So for you, like, how do you kind of structure your day or your week to make sure that you are kind of keeping both in mind and making sure that everything is a well-oiled machine to the best of your abilities, right?
It's a great question. And it took a long time to even consider that because I was just in it. It was just build. There's a million things to do. But over time, what's important for any leader, entrepreneur, otherwise, I always say to our clients, it's important for leaders to develop a reflective practice. So even if you're not trying to grow a business, but you're trying to be a better leader, at the end of each day, at the end of each week, you should look back and say, how am I doing? My plan today was X. How did I do? Did I accomplish what I set out to? What do I need to change? What do I need to do more of or differently tomorrow? And what's my plan for that? It's no different than growing a business. So it's one thing to put in lots of hours, but that might just be busy work. And so the reflective practice that I've tried to adopt is, what am I doing to grow the business? So the to-do list is just a set of activities unless we have alignment around the priorities. And that may sound so simple, but a lot of times people just make themselves busy. And so when we make ourselves busy, it's important that we keep the end in mind and work backwards. If the goal is to grow the business, then there should be a lot of stuff that doesn't get in the way. A lot of meetings we shouldn't take. That might be a catch-up coffee. That might be a seminar you really wanted to learn about, but maybe it has nothing to do with growing your business. Maybe it's just a interest. Well, maybe that's something you can, download an Audible book and do it in the evening, but don't take out your precious hours during the work days for maybe personal interest stuff. And again, I'm not advocating that it's all grind, all work. However, there should be a high level of quality inputs that lead to those outputs. And it's the awareness of what you're doing that is going to lead to that over time.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I want to dive into that sustainability and scalability aspect of it because when you talked a lot about earlier, it's like we're trading a lot of our time in order to get a certain return. And then over time, it's not scalable, right? Because you can't have someone exactly be you, right? And so as you help leaders and as you kind of grow your, this is like not your first business at all, like for anyone who hasn't seen your profile, like you've built multiple businesses. How are you keeping sustainability and scalability at the forefront of your mind so that you're not kind of going back to old habits of grinding 80 to 100 hours a week or whatever, just to kind of feel like you're spinning the wheels and not actually doing it in a way where you can actually grow your business, right? So yeah, I would love to kind of hear your thoughts on that piece.
Yeah, I'm happy to. A couple things come up, and the first thing is working with a team. So if it is a solopreneur or a sole proprietor model in the consulting space, there is we like to use the term revenue ceiling. And that revenue ceiling is kind of firmly on top of your head because there's only so many hours you can work in a week and produce quality work to retain or grow. There's only so much you can charge in terms of for your time. Even if you get creative in your billing, people can generally figure out what you're charging them per session, per hour, whatever the case may be. And what a lot of people don't realize is that consultants are working at capacity. So most coaches are not working 40 hours a week. Most consultants are not doing 40 billable hours a week. If they are, they're working probably closer to, like you say, 100 hours a week. The 75% of coaches in North America work less than 7 billable hours a week. 7. And so that's why so many do it part-time. So to build a business in this space is dramatically difficult when there's so much competition and so many people don't really need to burst through that ceiling, because you don't want to come across salesy, but at the same time, you've got to beat those odds. So like I say, one way to do it is through a team, because now somebody can be working while I'm sleeping. Number two is to diversify products and services. So instead of just, I need to be face to face with you, we can have courses, we can have books. There can be different things that can happen where you do the heavy lifting to create content, but then you can be amortizing that time forevermore as long as you create products and services that are somewhat evergreen. In other words, tackling common problems that aren't really time limited or going away. This is what makes things like consulting and AI challenging. Super topical, super relevant, but AI is changing so fast that if you put a course together on AI, 6 months from now, that course is obsolete. So depending on the time, money, and resources required to create the course, you might not see an ROI unless you've got massive distribution.
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to switch gears a little bit into your mission, right? So your mission is to help 1 million values-based leaders reach their potential. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of different aspects that come into play that impact an individual's ability to reach their potential. So I'm going to tackle it from 3 angles with you. It's the self-leadership, the founder aspect, and then the culture aspect. So starting with the self-leadership aspect, what would you say is one of the most common things you've seen getting in an executive or a founder's way of achieving their potential?
I like the way you phrase that, what gets in the way. So what gets in the way of someone discovering their potential is severalfold. First is, like we said, their inner game. And part of that is their beliefs. When you hear chatter or noise from other people, and those people might be bullies, they might be detractors, whatever the case may be, it's so important not to internalize it. So that goes back to proximity. You want to make sure you spend your time with people who inspire you, uplift you, and remind you of your gifts, your value proposition, your strengths. And that also, it's malleable. In other words, someone's value proposition, someone's talent is not fixed. You can read another book. You can listen to another great podcast like yours. You can attend a seminar. You can work with a coach or leader or mentor. You can always feed your mind. We have about 100 billion neurons, and each of those neurons is capable of connecting to up to 7,000 other neurons. That is beyond trillions of ways that we can get from point A to point B, synaptically speaking. So there's basically a nearly infinite potential for creativity, intelligence, thought, and we're not tapping it well. So the great news is we can get better. But what's important is that we understand our beliefs. We also understand our inputs. Are we feeding our mind with those podcast books, inspiring people and stories, or are we watching 4 or 5 hours of TV every day? Are we surrounding ourselves with people that lift us up, or are we surrounding ourselves with people who are really comfortable staying put? or even shying away from growth. So those are a lot of the things that come in the way of a individual's, expression of their potential, their surroundings and their inner game.
Okay, I appreciate that. And now we're going to switch gears towards the founder to more of like a CEO, right? Because those are two very different things. So as you continue to help businesses scale and navigate those changes, what have you seen get in the way of founders being able to switch towards a CEO?
It's often mindset, and what we call it is founderitis. There is a difference between a founder and a CEO, and I don't know that there is a exact hard line between it. It's a very gray area, and typically what happens is the founder, especially if it's a solopreneur, does everything. They have to have the idea, they have to sell it, they have to serve, they have to run the money, they have to do the marketing, they have to create the systems and build the structures. They do everything. Eventually, they hire the team. Doesn't make their job easier. They're just differently busy. Now they're leading a team, probably still doing a bunch of sales, probably still in service delivery, still running the finances, still running the marketing. But as the team grows, now their role has to shift more and more to leadership. And this is where the transition to CEO happens, more and more to vision. And a great CEO, he or she has to have a great vision and surround themselves with people who are more capable in each functional area. And so for a founder to make that transition, they have to not be threatened by talented individuals. There's a saying in business that A players hire A players, but B players hire C players. So if someone is on that personal growth tip, passionate about getting better, they see another A player as an absolute advantage. Oh my gosh, this girl Angela is amazing. I get to learn a ton from her. Whereas a B player sees talent and potential as a threat. Uh-oh, she's going to take my job. And if you think about that at scale, if someone who's a B player is in a position to hire, now there's a bottleneck. Now that revenue ceiling is lower and lower because somebody has become the bottleneck to growth because of their insecurities. So a founder can become a CEO if they are big picture thinkers and all about a vision and not too married to their own ideas. But a founder is going to stay a founder and be unable to make that switch when they're too married to their own ideas, when they see talented individuals as a threat, and when they only want to hear what they want to hear, as opposed to seeking out diversity of thought, differences of opinion, and even challenging ideas.
Really great call out. And that ties into the last aspect that I want to cover with you, what's getting in the way of them achieving their potential. And it's that culture piece, right? Because you talked a little bit about it where you're like, you have to be okay with hiring people who are more talented and have different ways of thinking because they're more willing to challenge you in a healthy way, right? As you continue to propose ideas, solutions, etc. Right? So being able to develop that culture is difficult though, right? So what have you found has helped the leaders that you work with?
Really, it comes down to the environment they want to create. And this goes, we talked about having that end in mind. The more clear you are on where you want to go, your strategy becomes a lot, not easy, but a lot more clear in terms of what needs to happen. So if we are trying to do something that's never been done before, if you're trying to be a unicorn in the marketplace, then we need bold, innovative ideas. If innovation is central to creating the environment or the business you want to create, then it needs to be an absolute intentional part of everyday life in the culture. Culture, by the way, we just like to define as the way things work around here. And those things, the interactions, the way people treat each other, our little joke is that culture either happens by design or by default, or possibly by disaster. So we either get real intentional as leaders about how we want people to treat each other, how we want things to run, how we treat customers, how we want to have ideas challenged, or we say one thing and often do another. Profit above all is a culture. And that means we're going to say the right things on paper to check a box, but at the end of the day, what we're really going to do is we're going to follow what makes us more money. whether it's ethical or not, whether it aligns with what we said or not. And by the way, when companies get really intentional about culture, as defined by, there's 40 companies every year they call the BCWF, the best companies to work for. Those companies that are earmarked by highest performing, highest scoring organizational cultures, from 2002 to 2012, they outperformed the S&P 500 index by almost 4-to-1. Yeah, the average annual return on the S&P 500 over that 10-year period, including 2008, was 4.12%. That's the average annual return for the whole S&P 500. And the average annual return for the BCWF, those 40 best companies to work for, the best cultures, regardless of their industry, was over 16%. So when people say, well, we can't afford to X, can't afford not to. It's, are we looking at culture in, we can't invest in anything? Well, then you'll never move forward. Then you're going to have declining returns over time. So again, it's really important to be intentional. And if we want innovation, you need challenging thought. We need a culture that is based on trust and mutual respect. However, people need to feel the psychological safety to voice their opinion. If I'm worried about what everyone's going to think of me and I've got a potentially bold idea, I'm going to remain silent. But if I know that my reputation and my psychological safety is spoken for, if I feel like I can trust everyone around me, I can throw the craziest idea out there and it might get some puzzled looks. But if people sit with it, then we maybe move forward. And even if we don't move forward with that idea, any facilitator that's really good at what they do will tell you that in order to get great ideas, you need to have some really wild ones. We need to be stretching the imagination, stretching what's possible in order for us to get something that's novel and new. Otherwise, we're doing the old, maybe we could grow by 5% this year. Maybe we can think about cutting expenses. That's not innovative.
I appreciate all the golden nuggets that you just dropped there. And as we slowly wrap up our conversation, I want to touch on your TED Talk, Lasting Happiness is an Inside Job. You got over 110,000 views on YouTube, by the way, which is impressive. If you could share one takeaway from that TED Talk, what would that takeaway be?
Well, I'll align it to what we've already talked about. We've already talked about focus, and we didn't say, but was kind of baked in there, was self-awareness. And one of the most important parts of that TED Talk, the whole reason I wanted to give that TED Talk, was to help people align around what truly matters to them. I think that a lot of time, well, through my experience of coaching thousands of people over the last 3 decades through fitness and health, as well as, of course, corporate coaching, I've seen a lot of people achieve remarkable success from a career or financial standpoint and be miserable. These are people with, 2 vacations to Hawaii a year and the nicest car you can have and a $10+ million home and they're miserable. They're in absolutely toxic relationships. They're not happy. Their stress is up here. They're not even necessarily happy with who they are as a person. And so if using coaching language, it's important that when we think about our happiness, we have an internal locus versus an external locus. There is no amount of achievement that's going to give us lasting happiness. Making more money, well, then what? You could spend all the money in the world. In fact, sometimes the richest people are the most unhappy because they've gotten rid of that last excuse. How many of us say, I'll be happy when? Well, what happens if you become rich, win the lottery, or have that $1 million a year job plus, and then you're not happy? Uh-oh, now you got to do the hard work to look inside. So the most important takeaway from that TED Talk is for people to get to know what really matters to them, their values, their purpose, where they want to be in life, who they want to be with, because it's those things that are going to create more lasting happiness and more frequent moments of happiness than external achievement. Not to say that achievements don't make us happy, but that happiness can be fleeting, and it can be harder and harder to even become happy if that's the only way we kind of refuel our cup.
What a great reminder of just really taking a step back and defining like what success, happiness, all that actually means to you, and not what is by default created for you, right? Because I think that's where that misalignment happens, is when we're in that autopilot mode. So I'm curious, like, would your answer be different for my second last question to you is like, what do you think it takes to unleash an individual or organization's potential? Or is it exactly what you just described through your TED Talk?
I think to unleash their potential, it always starts with us. You can't necessarily control the environment you're in terms of your organization culture right in the moment. Yes, you have control whether you stay there or find another job, or if you become a leader to help improve the culture. But the point is, people can control their internal environment first. You can contemplate what you want and where you want to be. That's the first step. Get clear on what you want. Then we can get clear on what it's going to take to get there. Strategize, come up with ideas. Then it's time to get going. It's time to spend more of our time getting after what you want. I've already talked about leaders need to adopt a reflective practice. It's important to not just think about how we're doing, but also, am I on the right path? I said this is what I want. Now making progress. Is this truly what I want? Because we change, we evolve. When you achieve one goal, it's important to have the next one. Even when you achieve a mission, it's even more important that we think, well, now what? As long as you've got oxygen in your lungs and blood pumping through your body, there's work to do. And so we want to think about, why am I here? What makes me happy? Because most of us, we are here to serve in some way, shape, or form. And we find out in what service we want to be in, our lives have more purpose, our lives have more meaning, and it's okay to get well compensated along with that. But I think that that's the after effect, not the driving force.
I appreciate that. And speaking of being in service to others, what's one thing that is top of mind for you that others can kind of keep in mind, whether it's to use your service or to potentially help you as you continue to navigate your journey?
Well, I believe, and this comes right from one of my mentors, that all of the world's top problems come down to leadership. Either we have the problem because of poor leadership, or we have a new problem and it's going to take great leadership to solve. That's why, to me, it's so important that I spend time helping over 1 million leaders discover their potential, because every leader I help goes and helps a team, goes and helps solve a challenge or a problem. So the more that I can do for others, the more that there is a web effect that's almost incalculable. So what can people do for me? Bring me your challenges, especially leaders. Those could be business challenges, those could be philanthropic, those could be community challenges. But the more leaders I can help, then I really, at the end of the day, get to make my corner of the world a better place. And that's what it's all about.
Well, Stan, I really appreciate you sharing all the golden nuggets in your stories today. And like, for those who don't know, you were named by CEO Weekly as one of the top 15 executive coaches who are propelling leadership mastery. And then you were also named last year as an executive coach to keep an eye out on, right? One of the top 10. So with all that being said, like the fact that you just dropped all these nuggets for free, I really do hope that people do connect with you and get to further experience the value that you're going to help them create. So thanks again for your time, and to everyone else that's tuned into another episode, thank you for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll know, and I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode. Till then, stay safe.